Yo, what's going on, PTM fam? Welcome to another episode of PTM Multisport. Today I got my great friend. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
All right.
Yeah,
All right. Ready for this interview?
I am.
All right. So I actually met Meena. What was it? Back in last winter, like October, November. So as folks may know or may not know, I coach with DC Tri Club's new triathlete program. And we were doing this tri weekend, and we had a swim day, and she hit us up like, hey, I want to come out, but I don't know how to swim. I only know how to backstroke. And I'm like, hey, pull up. I'm like, pull up. This is the perfect opportunity for you to come learn about the community. So I'm really excited to not only learn more about her story, but bring it to you all to share her story, because I think she's personally dope. She doesn't realize how dope she is. And a lot of people that are going to be tuning in now or later are also agree that she's pretty cool. So with that, as we get into that coolness, can you tell people a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how long have you been here in DC?
Hello everyone, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much, Mike. This has just been a really wonderful opportunity. So it's actually, I was born in Baghdad, Iraq, and I came when I was 3. And then just by a crazy series of events, we actually ended up becoming political refugees when I was a little girl. So I spent my childhood growing up as a refugee. Wow. That has its own sets of challenges and everything. Ironically enough, we ended up in Jersey.
Okay, what part of Jersey?
North Jersey, there's an invisible line between north and south. And we don't know where it's as arbitrary as anything, but we don't acknowledge as central Jersey. Right. And then after Jersey, I actually moved to Baltimore for grad school for 5 years. Okay. And then made my way down to Silver Spring, Maryland, and then came down to DC for work.
Cool, cool. I love it. So you were so young. You said 3 years old when you came to the U.S. and to New Jersey specifically. So I know I really don't remember anything, but as far as when I was 3 years old, but can you tell us what are some of the first memories as far as your transition as a young person at this time?
Yeah. So actually one of my first memories of New Jersey was snow.
Snow.
Yeah, it was the craziest thing. And that was, and again, this was, and that was when I was 4 years old. Okay. So it was by that point, we made it to Jersey, and it was around winter time because we came from California to Jersey. And the first thing I remember was snow, and then actually also the '92 Olympics.
Okay. What do you remember about that?
Oh my gosh, I was obsessed with gymnastics.
Yeah.
I discovered gymnastics. Dominique Luciano. Like, I was just obsessed with the '92 Olympics, and that was really so. That and snow were like 2 really interesting experiences that I remember very vividly.
So were you ever a gymnast?
No, unfortunately not. I couldn't. Yeah, my Middle Eastern parents were like, "Yeah, get your butt in school. Like this is not happening."
I feel that. So thinking about personally, what were some of your first memories of your athletic journey?
So actually, unfortunately, I didn't get to grow up with the lab sports. It just didn't. It wasn't a priority, my parents' priority at the time. At the time, it was really survival, and we were in this sort of, kind of get through the day-to-day, which had its own slow challenges. That there were times, and if I'm being very candid, where we didn't know if we were going to get deported, and that kind of stress and strain on like the parents really does trickle down. Right. So sports was a non-issue. Yeah. And then what was my first real introduction to basically athleticism was actually during grad school. Okay. Or at the end of college, beginning of grad school. Yeah.
All right. So I wanted to really get into that story about the athletics, but I do really think that story about your, as you said, just having that uncomfortable feeling and not knowing if you're going to get deported. So again, being a very young child, but can you talk a little bit about when you actually started to process, hey, this is a space that I may not be from? Like, when did you realize that although all you knew probably was America, right? But this was not quote unquote home for you.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question because that comes with sort of rectifying two different cultures as well.
Right.
And I knew we weren't fully American. I was born here. But at the same time, it was very rocky. So we're trying to actually create this microcosmic culture within our household, but also trying to assimilate into an American culture. And actually, that's something you pick up as a child fairly young. Like at between 4 and 5 years old, you realize very quickly like you might be a little bit different, or come from a very different background. It's really those are very formidable experiences.
So what was your experience like going through school at that time? Especially, I know you went into grad school, but going through elementary to middle to high school. Can you talk a little bit about those experiences?
So I kind of knew that my parents were dealing with stressors that maybe other kids' parents weren't, and so I kind of knew that. But at the same time, my parents did do a really good job of shielding us from from feeling different as well. So it was my normal. Right. But I think one of the things that my parents kind of really pushed us very young was just get smart, because that's your currency. Get educated, work hard. There's no replacement for that. That's so there's almost this tax that you have to come in to this country that you have to pay, right. And it's this really like hard work that my dad really he did. He built his life and our life along with it.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So tell us about what kind of student you were. I know you say you were. I'm assuming you were a smart student because that's what your parents prioritized. But tell us what were some of your favorite subjects for you? Yeah.
Bill Nye the Science Guy was the Magic School Bus was like my go-to. I was obsessed with those. So I was a science dork. I loved science. And sure enough, I made a career out of it.
I know. So that's a really good transition. So you mentioned athletics being really introduced to you through grad school in Baltimore. So let's combine the two, and now you have this love for Bill Nye the Science Guy and science as a whole, right? And now you're here in Baltimore. So, one, how did you choose Baltimore? What school did you go to? One, for undergrad, but two, for your master's program or whatever program, graduate program. Sorry.
Yeah. So actually because my parents didn't have a college fund. So we were just sort of my parents were still figuring out the college system here, which is very different than back then. Mm-hmm. And so I went to the first school that gave me a full ride. So I went to a state school, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Okay. And I double majored in biology and environmental science, and then minored in business as well. Okay. And then I got a research grant to study at NYU. So I did my master's at NYU for 2 years. Wow. And then I did my PhD at the Johns Hopkins University. Okay. Got another research grant, and I was there for 5 years. Uh-huh. It was a very tearful, arduous experience. It lives up to its name. It's a tough school. It was a tough program. More often than not, I was like, I'm not going to make it out of here. Yeah. So, yeah.
I understand. So what helped you get through it then?
Running.
Running? Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. I did not prompt that, by the way. I did not know she was going to say that. All right, so tell us about that. Now you're introduced to athletics, and we just learned all together, y'all, that it was running. I'm like, gosh, was that my crazy? No, but so tell us about this experience. Yeah. Who introduced you to running? Because although it seems simple enough, I go throw on shoes, I go outside, I run. It's not that simple, right? No. So how did you learn about it? Who were some of your first mentors? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I started my last year of college, and freshman 15 does not limit it to freshman year. That's not how science works.
That's how science works. The science
So my final year, my last year, I actually took a little bit of less credits, and I had more time, and I started running, and I started with a 5K. So my first 5K was actually September of 2010.
Okay.
And then the following year...
One second, where was your first 5K?
It was in Wayne, New Jersey.
Wayne, New Jersey?
Yeah, my hometown. So very fitting.
Yeah, so why'd you choose that one?
It was the closest one, and I was still living with my parents at the time. Yeah. So that was my first 5K, then built it up to a 10K.
Yeah.
And by the way, like, I didn't know anything. Nothing. I didn't know what scarf to wear. I didn't know what shoes to wear. I mean, absolutely nothing. So I did a lot of reading. It was a lot of self-discovery. It was a lot of trial and error, which was, let's try this, fail at this doesn't work, change this, and you're constantly modifying. And so I did that for at least 2 years, just trying to figure this out and figure out training and stuff like that. And then finally, once I got to the half marathon, which was the following year, I was like, I think I have a knack for long distance. I can just sort of put myself in cruise control and just go. Meena Aladdin is not synonymous with speed. It's just not. It's just. But I think it lends to I'm an inherently just from my childhood became a very gritty person, and the half marathon transitioned into a marathon. That marathon became ultra marathon. So I was running 50Ks. A little bit more than 50Ks at times, and so I just was happy. I kind of happy stuff for a really long time.
All right. So as we talked a little bit about that progression going from the 5K all the way to the 50K. Gosh, just thinking about that, processing as I say that out loud just seems crazy. So, but can you talk a little bit about that? Like, how would you read a lot? Were you training with the community? Who were those people that were showing up for you? And although you used a lot of those resources and did a lot of self-discovery, who were helpful? Who were some of the folks in the early stages?
Honestly, it was a lot of solo stuff.
A lot of solo stuff.
I'm not even kidding you. When they say running is a solitary man's activity, I really, it was really that for me. And so, it was a lot of trial and error, but not so much. I was part of the Hopkins Marathon team, but because everyone's schedules were so crazy, it was just everyone was running on their own, and we would maybe get together for a weekend, maybe once a month or so. But a lot of the training, was solo.
So a lot of solo training. So just curious, how would you balance, running, and now you're in this PhD program. So how'd you balance the two?
So running was just, it became, it was, every time I wasn't in lab, I was running.
Okay.
That's how it was funny, I would plan my experiments and then put my run in between. So if I'm incubating cells for an experiment, I would make sure to take my shoes and then I would run out the lab and do a few laps around campus, say hi to my mentors in my gym clothes as they're leaving, and I'm going back into lab all sweaty. And so it's really not, there's no glamour about it. And then the weekends were just reserved for long runs.
Weekends, okay. That makes sense.
And that was my structure.
All right. So I actually want to read this. So if I read this right beforehand, you did during your third year of your PhD program, and you may know where I'm going as I start to say this. You did 2 marathons and 3 50Ks.
Yeah, in 1 calendar year.
In 1 calendar year.
Yeah, it's pretty stoked.
All right.
But that,
real quick, did y'all hear that? Because Danny, can you let me know if people are putting hearts in? Acknowledge that you heard that. So she did 2 marathons. I gotta read it again because I'm like, yo, this is crazy. 2 marathons, which is 26.2 miles, and 3 50Ks. I had to read it again because I'm still trying to put this together. How? Why?
I was really stressed out.
All right.
I was perpetually stressed out. So, it was. I hit my stride as a runner. I realized that I can run for a really long time, and that's not to say I was also getting injured. So in that time, I was also recuperating from injuries that I was sort of accruing on these really crazy long runs. As it turns out, I don't have the best foot structure, so I was getting stress fractures, and so I was kind of running, getting in really good shape, and then getting stress fractures, and so it got to the point where you're like, what's the trade-off? And so I
all right,
I had to slow down.
All right, so you had to slow down to bump it up.
Yeah.
All right. So how did you realize that was the thing you needed to do? Were you talking to other people, or was it just a lot of self-discovery still at this time?
A lot of self-discovery.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
All right. So it seems like running has always been a big part of your life once it was introduced in your life. So just curious, what was it like to realize and embrace that it's now a big part of your personality?
Oh yeah, it's still part of my identity.
Right.
I think that's the biggest thing. I'm still fairly new to cycling, and I don't think I adopted it yet as part of me.
Mm-hmm.
But running, I used to introduce people like, oh yeah, I'm Meena Aladdin, I'm a runner. Like that was just how I introduced myself to people.
Yeah.
But I think it became an inherent part of my identity. I think it spoke to the type of person that I am, which is someone who really likes. I thoroughly enjoy challenges. I like to know whether or not. I like to push my body to its limits, and I like to do things I'm not sure I'm capable of doing. That's really what I really appreciate about running and sport in general, and endurance sport.
I mean, and it seems like just through your family structure, you knew that you were capable to get this PhD and become a scientist, but that's hard
debatable.
too.
That remains debatable. There were so many times where I'm like, I'm leaving. I'm like calling my parents. I'm like, I'm leaving. Like this is not working. But I think science is in and of itself trial and error, fail.
Right.
Like you're constantly. And that's why I actually think failure is a huge part of growth. Failure is a huge part of my growth as a scientist, as a runner, as an athlete. Failure is just we shy away from it and we don't talk about it. You'll never see someone on Instagram. We see a lot of people like finishing races, being happy, but you don't see like the amount of DNFs that people have, or or setbacks. And I think that's just that's maybe to me much more important part of the story than finishing.
I agree. Actually, when we think about Perfect Time in Multisport, right, a big reason that we wanted to start this is a lot of platforms and a lot of communities, you hear these success stories and you hear the 80 to 100, but you hardly hear the 0 to 80. Like, tell me about the time when you were injured and you needed to get started again, right? Tell me about the time you had that DNF, but you had to go out to do another race. So, actually, asking that question to you, think about some of those first injuries. And now I know you're still a very active person. So how did you get from having the first two injuries, and like you wanted to continue on, especially in running? Because I do have some questions about the cycling. So let's keep it to the running part.
To the running. Yeah, sure. So one of the injuries that I was facing were like, as I said, stress fractures.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, I would like basically like try and bribe doctors. Like, I don't care what you have to do, get me back. Like it's just kind of like get me back rolling and get me back running. I knew that still the joy that I garner from running is it trumps the pain and agony of like actually training for it and getting injured and trying to come back. But there's this intense passion that I have that wasn't extinguished by injury. It was just shifted because I had to shift my goals. But and so I think that was a really important lesson to learn. I think people do have their limits, and you just have to kind of respect your body's limits.
Yeah. Okay. So how about mentally though? I mean, you're doing these 5Ks, now 50Ks, and you have this stress fracture. So I recognize having the professionals go out and help, but how is it for you to say, hey, this is still something I can do?
Yeah. Honestly, when I was injured at those times, I would go to the gym and work out every other part of my body, and sort of. So I did everything to strengthen my body and to keep keep myself strong.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know if it's just that it didn't stop. It didn't seem, whether for better or worse. I just didn't want to stop, and because I would find just immense happiness running, and that was just I could get in my head, and that was it.
All right.
Yeah.
So I know there is a big community that supports you, and shout out to everybody that shared this. And they're like, "Ooh, let's talk about Meena the cyclist," and we are about to get into it. No,
it's another crazy.
So let's transition into the cycling conversation. When did you start cycling?
June 2018.
June 2018.
Yeah.
Wow, June 2018.
Yeah. So June 2018, and I say that because
it's only August 2020. So you only been cycling for like 2 years.
Less if you subtract injury, because I was out for about 6 months.
Gosh. All right. Yeah. Cool. So June 2018. Yeah. How'd you get introduced to the sport of cycling?
So my first. It's funny, you finish grad school and you're pretty excited about entering the workforce. You enter the workforce and then you realize it's not that cool. And so my first office job was a sedentary job, and it was actually really cool. The nature of the work was awesome, but the environment was very isolating. And so what I would do, I was working all day and then would run at night and realize I hadn't spoken to another human being. It was really difficult. Yeah. So the only reason I had a bike was because I did a charity ride in 2014, and it was from Philly to DC, and that was one of the first rides I've ever done.
All right, so you did the Philly to DC ride. How many miles was it?
I don't even remember. I didn't have a bike computer, but I knew we were riding like 60 to 70 miles a day, if I'm not mistaken.
How many days was it?
3 days.
3 days.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's call it 180, 200 miles.
Yeah.
So this was even before you became a quote-unquote cyclist. And I actually hate to use those air quotes, because if you get on the bike, you're a cyclist. So this is before it became a more structured part of your life. So taking a step back, prior to 2018, how did you prepare for this ride from Philly to DC in 2014?
I was getting ready for the Philly Marathon.
Right.
So I was just 100% runner, and then heard about this charity ride that was near and dear to my heart.
What was the charity?
So the cause was a completely humanitarian cause, and it was cycling for Gaza. So it was cycling for the children of Gaza, and it was to help injured children get medical care.
Okay.
And so it's completely apolitical. But it was it's just something that really resonated with me, and so. I found out about it sort of serendipitously, and I was getting ready for the Philly Marathon, but I was like, I think I can squeeze that in because it's in September.
Take your time.
And then, I was like, I think I can just try and ride this thing, And I was like, I haven't been on a bike since I was like 6. When I learned that was the last time I was on a bike. Yeah. And basically bought this old Jameis hybrid, like oversized bike, and just send it, just do it.
Hey, that's no problem. Just get out there and do it.
Yeah.
Like, we actually had an interview with Will Lloyd, and I just loved that interview. So if you weren't able to check that out, Will talks about folks getting into cycling. Like, people have these rules and expectations, but when we talk, we're here talking to me, and it's like, hey, this is something I wanted to do. This is something I love doing. This is what I did. All right, so you had this Jameson. You're training for this ride. Did you even train?
Not much. So I did do a couple of group rides to figure out what group riding was.
All right.
But that was it. Like I didn't have time. I was a grad student, and riding actually, like riding out there, you have to drive, you have to have your bike, you have to do all these things. I started off with a beach cruiser that was my mom's.
Okay.
So you have to sit upright on your first bike. That's just like basically an unwritten rule. Like you have to sit on this cruiser and figure it out. Yeah. And then you realize that that's not appropriate for group riding. Yes. But yeah, so I figured it out. I did the ride. I came back and packed up my bike and didn't see it again. I was really focused on running and getting my running goals and doing my dissertation.
Okay. So how did cycling help back in 2014, again, before you became more of like a consistent cyclist? How did that help, especially knowing that you had this history of injuries. How did that transition to you running?
So I think I was actually pretty fit that year specifically as a runner, which transitioned to the cycling. That's why I was able to do it with not much training and not much like preparation.
Yeah.
But it's certainly, I think that ride in of itself, after I did that ride, took a week off, did the Philly Marathon, and ran my best time. So there's probably some correlation.
Yeah.
You know, I was still moving but not pounding. So that was a really new phenomenon for me.
All right, I love it. So now we're up here in 2018. How'd you get into cycling then? Who are some of the first strokes to help you in that process?
So really cool. What I did was actually I had to go home for the weekend at my parents' house, and I found my old Janus, and I was like, well, everything is kind of broken, and it's like the brake pads were, I don't know, like everything on that bike just needed help.
Yeah.
And so pumped up the tires and let's see if I can go for a ride, and just tested it out. And then I was like, well, I want to see if there's another community I can tap into. And I emailed every team in the area, in the DMV area, wondering if they would take a non-cyclist and just help them integrate into like as part of their team. And a few teams got back to me, and one asked me for a race resume. I was like, I run? Like, literally, that was my resume. They're like, yeah, that's not going to cut it for us. So I was like, okay. But Route 1 Velo got back to me, and they're like, there are these crazy races that we do on Wednesdays called Greenbelt. Come show up and just check it out. And I was like, this is so cool. Like, just got hooked completely. And they kind of saw me, and it was amazing. No judgments, no questions asked. It was just, come on over. Like, that's it. That's, if you have some level of fitness, then you can ride with us.
All right, I love that. So shout out to Route 1. Route 1 Velo. So you say you just did some outreach, and do you still ride with this community now?
So not during the pandemic, but So Route 1 showed me how to ride a bike, how to ride in groups, how to draft, how to do all these things. And then they allowed me to represent them in situations that maybe I shouldn't have done. Like, I showed up to my first crit wondering what a crit is, which you shouldn't do, like, under any circumstances. You just don't do it.
All right, so you show up to a crit like, oh, it's a crit. I'm here, but what am I doing?
I have no idea. Like,
and what was that experience like?
So I have this, sometimes...
One sec, I'm sorry to cut you off, but what is a crit, and what was your first experience like for the people that don't know?
So a criterium race is a really short course. It's a circle course, and it's usually less than a mile. And you just go out in circles, and there's a lot. It's actually very technical because you corner a lot. You have to actually watch other people's wheels if you're in part of the peloton. And then, sure enough, my bike was pretty big and heavy, so I dropped my chain, got dropped, got lapped, like anything that you could go wrong went wrong, and I was like, I hate this. This is not for me. I am not built for this. It was like a half hour. It took me longer to drive here. So that is not for me, and that was my first and last one.
All right. I love that. So that was your first and last one. So did you represent Route 1 Velo in any other spaces? Yeah, so I realized that there are also time trials. I didn't know what a time trial was, which is you against the clock. And that's great because I don't need to ride behind anyone or really care about anyone. And then, so time trialing, I kind of loved, I really enjoyed it. And what I would do for that is just go out to the CNO and just hammer it on my own and just practice. Another thing that one of my biggest races was actually Croatian 100 miles of gravel. 100 miles of gravel, so that was 9 months into cycling, and I just realized that I really love gravel. I love going long distance, just like my running. I'm not gonna, I think I'm someone who lacks power and speed, but makes it up with grit and hard work and kind of just going in my head and just working and chipping away at miles. I think that's just how I operate. I love that. I love that. So, as we were talking about all this, I know that there are some other really impressive things you did outside of the list that we already have, which is really cool. But you also participated in a team for the Ride Across America.
So I'm working on that.
Oh, you're working on it.
Yeah,
All right. So when are you expecting to do that?
Oh man. So RAM was canceled this year. Obviously, we're still looking at it being canceled, if not delayed next year. So I'm actually still in the process of building a 4-woman team, but everything is so uncertain. I think COVID sort of just threw us off a little bit.
Yeah.
So now I think we're just putting that on hold. My next challenge is a solo challenge, actually, because it's safest.
Mm-hmm.
I did half of Everest.
Okay, you did half of Everest. When did you do half of Everest?
That was 3 weeks ago now.
3 weeks ago.
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited. Yeah.
Ooh, so also taking a pause because I have a ton of questions about the Everest thing. Not the Everest thing, the Everest ride. I shouldn't call it a thing. I know exactly what it is. But as we always tell folks, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, we definitely want to make sure we're keeping this engaging. So please, please, please ask those questions. If you are watching this later or listening later, you're like, damn, I wish I was there to ask questions. As I always say, you should have been here. But as you all are asking those questions, I do have a few questions. So tell us about the Everest ride that you did. Like, how long was it? How high was it? Tell us all the things.
So this is half.
So you did half.
Yeah, right. So it's in preparation for hopefully the full, but we'll see. So just to give you an idea of what Everesting is, it's you choose a hill, any hill, doesn't matter the length, and you go up and down that same hill until you reach the elevation gain of Everest, or in my case, half.
Yeah.
And then you can, so I actually did it here in Cleveland Park it's called Normanstone.
Normanstone in Cleveland Park, okay.
Yeah, so it's behind the cathedral.
Okay.
And I went up and down Normanstone. The issue that I didn't know I was going to finish it. Like, I was coming off a back injury. The only reason I started doing hill repeats was to get my strength back.
Okay.
And so I did it, but I chose a very hot day. And I didn't realize the heat can get to you as much as it did to me. And I was just happy to finish, but also felt like I got away with murder. I think the next time we do this, it will not be an intense heat. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So how would you prepare for it? So I know it was about how many feet? 14,000, 15,000 feet?
So right between 14,000 feet. So the ride turned out to be, and then there were issues with my Wahoo and Garmin and all sorts of gadgets that were picking up the elevation gain, but it turned out to be 107 miles on this if you can go up and down, it's 1.4 miles. Mm-hmm. And so I went up and down about over 70 to 75 times.
Gosh. And
people in the neighborhood were really confused. There were cops circling me, wondering like, this is very suspicious. This looks really weird. And so they were just wondering like, what is going on? Yeah. It's in a really beautiful neighborhood of DC, so it's very highly the security is pretty tight. And so I did that. The heat was just on a whole nother level though.
Yeah.
Just kind of bleeding salt.
Wow.
I retained close to 6 to 8 pounds of water. Just couldn't. It was just not a pretty sight.
So what was your nutrition like this time?
Oh, it was not good. Yeah. So I think with the heat and everything, and that's why I won't do it in this intense heat. I was trying to eat cookies. That was as much as I could do, but I wasn't eating. It was. The good thing was my ultra marathon mindset kicked in, and I was like, okay, Meena, you're gonna ride 1,000 feet and then stop and then drink, and I did that I left my car at the bottom and did that.
Okay.
But honestly, I couldn't have done this ride without the support of some amazing people that came out and were just dragging me up. Like, all right, come on, Meena. Route 1 fellow guys came out, and friends of mine from other teams came out. One gentleman named Rudy, Mindy, and everyone else who came out was just amazing, and I was just so grateful for them to just pull me up and down.
And, literally. Yeah. So how long did it take you to do this 100+ mile ride?
10 hours and 22 minutes.
10 hours and 22 minutes.
Yeah, so advised.
Wow. And gosh. All right. So thinking about training for it, what were some things you did to prepare for this ride?
I did repeats on that hill.
On the same hill?
Yeah, okay. But we realized I'm not a very good descender. I think my bike handling skills aren't up to par yet, and that comes with the territory of being a new rider, but also picking up riding a little bit later in life.
Yeah.
When I picked up, my 30-year-old female brain is like saying, no, you're not going to go beyond a certain speed or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm not a particularly a powerful climber, but I'm also a very sketchy descender. So the things that were actually failing me weren't my legs; it was my hands and my arms. And the repetition of going down a windy hill was a little bit tough. So I'm definitely looking for a straighter hill.
Okay.
I'm accepting any suggestions. So I'll be scouting out new routes. This is my rest week.
Yeah.
But after this week, I'll be scouting out new routes.
All right.
Yeah.
So if you have any suggestions, especially here in the DMV for some crazy hills Meena can try out, I'm curious too. Put them in the chat, send us a DM, and we definitely share that resource. But as we're thinking about that, what are some of your favorite routes in DC, in the DMV? I know that was a question we had from the crowd. What are some of your favorite routes?
Yeah, I love the C&O Canal.
Okay.
I love going out and just kind of being at peace and being out in nature on the C&O.
Yeah.
I love going out on MacArthur too. Notice how these are both flats. I don't like the irony of it. There's like 1%, 0% grade is the trend here. I actually love Great Falls.
Love Great Falls.
Because of my obsession for repeats, I only do repeats on Great Falls now. It's
right.
The weirdest thing, yeah.
Hey, that works. That works. All right. So going back to this Everesting ride, I'm really curious, and I had this question and I actually skipped right over. One is, how'd you feel during the ride? And did you have a mantra or just something to keep you motivated throughout?
Oh, yeah. So I felt like crap.
You felt like crap, all right.
Like it wasn't getting any better. The day was getting hotter. It was a super tough day. It was a really tough day. But one thing, my mantra was 1,000 feet at a time. 1,000 feet at a time. And then people were passing me along like a baton. It was amazing. Like friends would come in, and then another person, and we were just socially distant, like ride together.
Yeah.
And they're just these wonderful souls, honestly. Like, then there was a time, if I'm being really candid, where the heat got to me so badly. I was sitting on the side, and I took a short break, and I was alone. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And I was crying, and I did break down, and then but then you get back up, and you're like, all right, that's enough. And, you try and like just move on with it.
All right. I respect that. Oh. Hey, I mean, you got it done. The hottest day of the summer, but you knocked it out. I probably remember that day too. Now I think about it 2 weeks ago. So kudos to you. But I know you're planning to do the full Everesting challenge. So it definitely seems like endurance is a big part of your life, not only in athletics but also in academia. So I am really curious, how do you feel like the two overlap for you?
Oh, they do terribly. And like it's just I guess I put myself into a certain mental like place, just a place, and just kind of literally one thing is one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other, and I did that. That was my approach to science. If we would answer one question, even if it's a small question, it would lead us to another question. It would lead us to some other hypothesis. Mm-hmm. And so, just small sustainable changes, small steps. Because if you look at Everest or half of Everest or whatever, it almost seems impossible. And I'm not saying by any means that I'll be successful at Everest this year. The probability of failure is actually really quite high. And I'm always going in expecting that and accepting it as well. And if I don't get it this year, it'll be something I'll work up to next year as well. But yeah, I think small changes, but also realizing that the things that I often undertaken feel like a lot bigger than I am.
Okay, yeah. I love that. So you were talking, as we were talking about the academia piece, I do know we really didn't really touch on your professional background, but I am really curious to hear a little bit more about, like, what are you doing professionally, and why did you take the time to get all these degrees, and how is it playing, how is it showing up in your life today?
Oh man. My actual training, I'm trained as an inhalation toxicologist.
Inhalation toxicologist.
Yeah.
All right. What is an inhalation toxicologist?
Yeah.
All right.
So it's a lot more. Well, it can be boring as interesting as you make it out to be. But so what I actually studied was the effects of air pollutants on the lungs, but at the molecular levels. So I'm trying to understand for my dissertation the effects of tobacco, cigarette smoke on the molecular mechanisms that cause cell death. So that's the very technical aspect. I'm not using. I'm using my degree to a certain extent, which is, but I'm using it as more of a public health, broader public health application. So now I'm currently at the FDA, where we're doing regulatory work and regulatory toxicology, where we're looking at tobacco products and pretty much either allowing them on the market or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Seems like some impressive stuff and important stuff. So definitely appreciate you taking a second to break that down. But getting back again, if anybody in the audience has any questions, please let us know. We definitely want to make sure we engage with you all in this process. And I see a hand up, so Danny, can you please let us know what that question is?
Hi team, KRT Cycling, Kings Ride Together from Philadelphia. Want to know if you've ever had any complications in the sport as a result of religion.
Oh, interesting. So definitely not religion so much, but I've actually, luckily the DMV accepted me with open arms, like this cycling community specifically, and I thought that might be a barrier. One of the things that I did find an issue with are cycling clothes. Actually, that was a big limitation. I couldn't really figure out how to get long cycling clothes that weren't thermal but were breathable and were for the summer. So my teammates actually made special orders for my kits, and they're long and thin, and I was really stoked about that. But that's actually the biggest limiter. I think it's sometimes clothes, sometimes finding clothes. Another one is myself. I remember the first time I put a helmet on my hijab, I felt this is really weird. This looks super. Like I wasn't sure if I can accept myself. But now it's just become a norm. Yeah.
I love that. And shout out to KRT.
Thank you.
If you know me, you know I love them. But I am curious about, you just spoke about the job and just some other resource and just the other clothing you have been wearing. I'm curious, can you share some of those resources, like who's been great, who's doing it well, who may not be as good as we want them to be, but may be doing it well. So can you talk about some of those resources for folks that may be interested?
Yeah, so my team store, in terms of brands?
Brands, people, anything.
Brands, Ascend Sportswear, which is, they make they're a team store. Pactimo, through District Taco Racing actually pointed me in their direction for their skin suits, and they actually turned out to be like super breathable. Machines for Freedom was another one, and actually I started to find more of these like long sleeve thin kits, and I just had to look in the right places. They're not totally like summer kits are like everyone, if you look up summer kits, you often get like the hits are short sleeves, but you just have to kind of start knowing where to look, and people have actually directed me in different and shout out to DT Racing for for pointing me in the right direction as well.
I love that. Yeah. And as far as your job, like where have been what are some good resources for that as well?
The fabric store.
The fabric store.
Yeah, so I learned through running which material works for me, and it's a white. I always wear white Georgette material. That's very standard, and it became part of my cycling uniform and my running uniform. Okay. It's breathable. It allows enough. It's somewhat breathable actually, and it's the thing that works for me. Yeah.
Okay. And I know you swim. you swim as well. So
Yeah.
is there any good resources for that?
So not as much, unfortunately. The modest wear that we see with swimming clothes is it's usually a tunic and long pants. And you can't really swim in that. There's so much drag.
Right.
So I actually started using. I found it on Amazon. These stingray, like they help prevent. They're these long. They look scuba suits, but they're made of. They're not neoprene. They're like really thin. Swimsuit material, and it worked well. Like there's drag, but I'm not looking to be a competitive swimmer.
All right. I mean, you got a main backstroke though, so I don't know. All right. So I have a few more questions, but I definitely want to make sure again we're engaging with the audience. So Danny has a question. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop it in. We do have a rapid fire segment coming up, so if you have any quick questions, start thinking about those. And once I give you the cue, let us know. But for this question now, Danny, can you please let us know?
Who are hijab-wearing athletes that you look up to?
Oh, interesting. Okay, so one of them is a Turkish, and I don't know her per se, but she's on Instagram, and she is one of the best, if not the best, martial arts karate athletes in Turkey. And her name is Kubra Dagli, and she's this amazing, just this incredibly talented athlete. I mean, her moves are incredible. She's so swift. But here I actually found a couple of hijabi riders, and I was I was so stoked. One of them is actually an ambassador at Pro Bike FC and out in Falls Church. And when I say she's a mother of 3 and a former ultra runner, so she is just an incredibly powerful athlete. She just kind of throws me to the dust.
I love that. So thinking about some, you were saying these are folks that you look up to, and we know that mentorship is a really, really big part of our journey as people. So are there any other mentors or people that have been supporting you, but also how are you supporting that community? Are you able to mentor folks at this stage?
So
just curious.
I haven't. Unfortunately, I guess because I'm still fairly new. But the mentorship that I got is actually from the community as a whole. Everyone imparted me with something, and and then you take what you can. You kind of have to sift through good advice and bad advice, and but the overwhelming majority of the cycling community here has been just unbelievable. And I saw that with my half Everest. People were coming out that I just was like, I was like, if my body could produce tears, I would cry. But I physically can't cry. So I think that's the mentorship. I haven't had a single mentor, just a lot of women who are just incredible riders that I also look up to.
I love that. Yeah. So speaking of community, you definitely understand and recognize, if you don't, the national reckoning around Black Lives Matter is just showing up in communities all kind of ways now. But for your personal, professional, and athletic life, how has it been showing up in those spaces for you?
Yeah, and I want to be very careful not to say that, or not to conflate my experiences as a Muslim woman with someone who's African American. Like, I think the systematic racism that Black people had to have endured for generations and actually centuries isn't. I mean, I even as a refugee and as someone who has been racially profiled, like I wouldn't want to conflate them. But I will tell you this: Everest, Black Lives Matters movement, especially now, because it happened when I was in Baltimore as well. I mean, that's when that's the grassroots part of it. That happened when I was in grad school. And unfortunately, I was really wrapped up in grad school that it took a second wave. It took this to really wake me up.
Right.
And it's something I deeply regret. It's something I feel some guilt about. But I am riding Everest to hopefully raise money for the NAACP's Legal Education and Defense Fund.
Okay.
Yeah. So Legal Defense and Educational Fund. Sorry. So I'm hoping it gave me some sort of purpose beyond me to train and to ride.
I love that. Appreciate you sharing that. And so how can folks support you and donate to the causes that you're supporting?
Yeah, so I do have a link on my Instagram profile at Aladdin.
Okay.
And you can totally the link is in my under my name in my profile. And so hopefully I'm so grateful for the generous support, whether emotional or just people who donated monetarily. I'm really grateful for that. I just hope I get as far as humanly possible at that time. Yeah.
All right, I love it. Yeah. And we'll also share that, share a page and share those resources so people can support her along the way. But thinking about staying along the lines of community, you were saying you didn't really show up for that first wave, but you're showing up now. So I do know that outside of being an athlete, outside of being a professional in sciences, right, you're also a community builder, a community organizer, and you're in the civil service space. So can you tell us a little bit about how you're showing up in the civil service space?
Yeah, so I was, back when I lived in New Jersey, I was actually a volunteer EMT and rescuer. So it was a really formidable experience. I learned the value of giving back, the value of sort of being part of something larger than you, or being something, being there when someone really, really does need your help. Yeah. And so it was also really cool because I got to cut cars. So that was awesome.
You got to cut cars?
Yeah, it was really awesome. And I was still doing that. I had to go on school leave because I was away for grad school. But when I was back in Jersey, when I was at home, I would take calls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And I know you're running for public office here now.
Yeah, and that's still up for debate. So I did put my, I actually casted in my petition to get my name on the ballot for ANC ANC member, commissioner for my single member district.
Yeah.
The issue that I think I'm running into is, am I spreading myself too thin? With Everesting coming up and then potentially Race Across America. It's a 2-year commitment. And I kind of am shying away only because if I can't commit 100% to my constituents, then I don't think it's fair for me to take someone's space. So we'll see. I'm assessing my workload at work at the FDA, and then seeing what I can handle.
All right, I understand that. Yeah. So we're about to start getting into the rapid fire questions. So again, please start dropping those questions down in the chat. Because we definitely want to make sure we keep this flowing as we start to close up. But I am curious about, as we finish this crazy year of COVID, I know you're looking forward to the Everest thing, but what are some things you're looking forward to not only this year, but as we go into next year, once things get to whatever the new normal is?
Oh yeah, I don't even know what normal is anymore.
It's
been, so besides Everesting, hopefully we can get the vaccine and get some sort of normalcy, I would hope.
Yeah.
There are the things that I really miss is seeing people's smiles. I realize we're outdoors here, and that's why I took my mask off. But the fact that we're not seeing people's smiles and not being able to hug each other is actually it's been wearing on me. I won't lie. Yeah. And even as a scientist, I know the importance of quarantining and separating and. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to hopefully planning Race Across America, building that team, and building, getting funds for that as well. Mm-hmm. And so so those are hopefully more long-term goals.
I love that. So also, as folks may notice, we're not in our usual studio space, which is our apartment. But we're not in the usual studio space. But shout out to Reverie. Am I saying that right? Hopefully I'm saying that right. All right. Shout out to Reverie for allowing us to use this space. Shout out to my guy Matt from District Cycle Works for making the connection. But as we get into the rapid fire part, before we get into that, again, start dropping those questions because we want to keep this going. We've got a few minutes. I'm curious. What has athletics taught you, period? Question mark. What has athletics taught you?
It's life.
Life.
Yeah, I mean, there are challenges, and there are good times, and there are setbacks, and there are bad times. There is perseverance, there is trials and tribulations, and they're just that. I mean, it's very parallel to life is not a sprint; it's a marathon. And I say that in sort of a very cliche. It is a very it's very cliche to say that, but it's very true.
Yeah.
And success isn't this linear line. It's failure, setbacks. It's maybe 10 steps forward, one step back.
Yeah.
All these things, and so just respect the process.
Yeah, I love that. And last question that I have, I know y'all are ready for this rapid fire. I keep saying it. You're like, damn, I got my question. But when we think about perfect time in multisport, we always want to think about how do people define the perfect athlete. So how do you define the perfect athlete? What makes the perfect athlete?
Oh man, that's a tough one. But I think I think everyone has their own strengths.
Mm-hmm.
So capitalizing on your strength and working on your weakness, I think that makes you a perfect athlete. Because a perfect athlete is perfect for everyone in their own individual. Because we're not born physiologically the same. And so we don't have the same experiences or the same goals even. But if you know what your strengths are, use them. Use them to your advantage. And then also don't, work on your weaknesses, but realize that might be a weakness that you have. For me, it's power and speed. But my strength is that I tend to be a very gritty person.
Yeah.
So that's something that I capitalize on.
I love that. Yeah, that perfect athlete question. I actually, for our website, I had some difficulty answering that question I asked everybody. So I definitely understand. But I'm ready to turn it over. So Danny, can you please take over the rapid fire question?
Sure. So talking about grit, getting a question from Coach Fitz from Grit.
Hi, Coach Fitz. Hey, Martin.
Coach Fitz wants to know what's the most helpful lesson you've learned in your cycling and or triathlon journey, and I think these questions overlap a little bit, so if you can tap into a little bit of that, we'd love it.
Yeah, one of the most significant things that happened to me in cycling is actually I had a really bad back injury, and it set me back quite a lot. Actually, this time last year, I wasn't walking, so I was June of 2019 all the way until almost late October, early November 2019. I was off the bike. But the things that I've learned was appreciation for your body. Your body is always in flux, so the body that you have today may not be the body that you have tomorrow. Really, intense gratitude for something that I took for granted every day, which was walking. This time last year, I was getting myself into a pool and trying to aqua jog, and then going out to Haynes Point to basically practice to walk again. So I'm really grateful for the progress, but I'm also grateful for the experience now, hindsight. And it brought me to you.
Yeah, that's
how we connected.
That's how we met. I know that time is starting to run out, but we're going to keep the conversation going. We always have the podcast. You can check it out. You're like, damn, they closed out and the time ended, and I missed the end of the conversation. That's why we have the podcast. That's why we have the YouTube channel. But we will definitely come back if for any reason this Instagram live shuts down. We'll just keep rolling though. You missed something? Check it out later. But Danny, do we have any other questions in the chat?
How do you stay motivated to train while recovering from an injury?
Oh man, that was actually the biggest motivator. I was in that pool like it was my lifeline. I was YouTubing backstroke like it was. So I learned it was just get your body back. Like I remember just telling myself I would, and I had my days where I'd cry and I would get really frustrated and. I would walk for 10 minutes and had to sit down on the floor. Like I was not in good shape. But the motivation was literally it was once and I remember walking at Haynes and remember feeling this is actually more difficult than any ultra I've ever ran.
Oh, wow.
This is like a different body. I was dealing with an enormous amount of pain, but boy was I motivated to get back. I was just get your body back. and every step was a victory. And I swear I'll never take the next step that I can have today for granted. It really taught me quite a lot.
That was something. I'm like, I had to take a breath after that. All right. Any other questions from the chat? All right. Well, again, our last question that we always ask, y'all here for the ending. Shout out to that. Our last question that we always ask people, if you had to kiss one, kill one, marry one, swim, bike, run, what would it be?
Can you repeat?
Yeah, all good. So you had to kiss one, kill one, marry one, swim, bike, run. What would it be?
So if I could run forever.
You would marry the run?
I would marry the run.
All right, which one would you kill? Which one would you kiss?
The cycling.
The cycling?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, so running's that
It's
first
still
all right.
Yeah, it was my first love.
I respect that. All right, so you're killing the swim.
Yeah.
Like that's all right.
Unless it's a backstroke, and then there's no event that requires as much backstroke. I was backstroking 1 to 2 miles every night. There's no event that requires that much backstroke.
hey, whatever gets it done, right? I love it. So if folks want to continue this conversation, where can they find you?
You can totally hit me up on Instagram, and be totally happy to connect if you want to just chat with me. And yeah.
All right.
Really.
So what's your Instagram handle?
Oh, it's is it Aladdin 1 or Aladdin 1? Oh, that shows how good I am with social media. I actually
All good. And again, we'll have this in the show notes, so whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on a podcast, or whether you're seeing this in Instagram, it will be in the comments later. So I'm sorry, in the what's the face? What am I thinking about?
Show notes.
In the caption, the show notes, everything I just said. Also, lastly, shout out to all of our partners. Shout out to people that are helping and supporting to make this happen. Like I said, Burberry for letting us use this space. Again, District Cycle Works, Athletic Brewing Company, Urban Athletic Club. I feel like I'm missing somebody.
Philly Bike Expo.
Gosh, shout out to my folks there. Again, really appreciative for everybody that's helping us build this community. We are really excited to share some more partners coming up here. Make sure you get that email. But I'm really appreciative to, again, everybody that's helping as we build this. So, yeah, that's all we got for today. Look forward to connecting with y'all next week. All right, peace, y'all.